All right, a couple of things that kind of stood out to me as as I was sitting here. One of the things is I don't get to sit in conferences anymore. Usually I'm either presenting or I'm working like at the booth, the Articulate booth. And then in the past, I've tried not to go to sessions because sometimes I'll go in the session and the people will see me and then they get all nervous because and then sometimes they'll even defer to me, and I kind of don't want to make people feel awkward, especially, a lot of times in workshops like this, it might be the first time they're presenting and then, all that stuff. So I'm always sensitive to that. A couple of things that stood out to me. One is I thought the sessions were all great. So the people just, give a hand to all the people who presented. So they did a really great job. One of the things, somebody talked during the panel was about the future, and one of the things I think is really exciting about where the industry, at least from the e-learning online part of it, that I think is really exciting is, in the years past, and I don't know how it's been over here, but like where I've worked at, training was like, if the economy was bad, the training group was always the first group to be gone, because apparently we weren't that valuable to the organization, because if we were good, the economy wouldn't be bad, right? So it all makes sense. So the training people are always the first people to go. So there's always this kind of worry about, am I going to have my job? And you're always, knocking down the person next to you so that you look better at work and all that. So you never have good working relationships either. But what's kind of cool is with all this technology, you look at like all these things outside of even just the learning world, right? But you look at all these things, the social media and all, and these sites and the resources and YouTube, and you just name it. Learning is a key component to most of those types of things. And what's neat about it is that now the training industry is really at the forefront, or could be, depending on how you position yourself in your career, is at the forefront of a lot of what's going on just outside, and as the technology is evolving, the learning is a key part of that, and that being in the industry, you're no longer seen as kind of a wart, right? Where we can get rid of your skin tag, we'll leave you there, but if things get bad, you're gone, right? So instead of being the skin tag in the organization, is that what they call it here in Australia? Okay. I was getting some looks. I didn't know if I was just grossing people out or if it was just a wrong term, right? Where's that guy from New Zealand, the sketch guy? Can you draw something for me? We'll put it up on the screen. But now you're really a key cog in the system, or you can be, because a lot of the technology and where organizations want to go, and they want to become more efficient with the things that they do, that learning and these technologies are all kind of converging. So it's really a neat time. And from my experience, I get a lot of people asking for freelancers. Every freelancer I know is busy. I'm running out of names of freelancers, so which I'll throw out later if you do freelance work. But everybody I know is just swamped with work, so it's a great time to be in this industry. So it's really at the forefront of where a lot of this stuff is going. The other thing, and this will kind of lead into this. One of the things, well, actually, I won't lead into that. How are we doing on the tweets? There, David, are you monitoring that? All right, and we're going to be wandering around the streets of Sydney all night. I'm going to be tired. Anybody going to the session tomorrow? All right, I might be a little sleepy. All right, let's go ahead. I'll go and give you this stuff that's important. Okay, so we're talking about how to become an e-learning or industry pro. So kind of two elements to that. One is, and this is a question I get a lot. I get about 2,000 emails every week. So if you've ever emailed me, has anybody ever emailed me? Did I respond back? All right, good. Sometimes, I just get swamped and I can't keep track of it. But one of the most frequent questions I get is, how do I get better at what I do, and how do I get the opportunities? Because maybe I want to change my jobs. If you're here with your manager, just pretend like you're not listening. But maybe I want to change what I'm doing, or I want other opportunities, or how do I get better at what I do within the organization? So it's one of the most common questions we get. And one of the answers I usually give is, one is, you've got to keep learning. So just keep learning. And then the things that you learn, you've got to apply, and you've got to go do something with it. One of the things, and then there's a lot of other stuff in between that. But one of the things that we do, like in the Articulate community, and even if you're not an Articulate user, you could still take part in this, is David does a weekly challenge. So every week we do these little mini challenges. And the idea with the challenge is that you get to practice your skills. So you got to do something, you get to learn something or some idea that might inspire you. Then you take that, you can do something. The idea is not to go build some big course, but just to practice doing something. And then you submit it, and other people criticize you and all that other stuff. No, we try to keep the criticism and stuff down. But the thing is, you got to learn, and you've got to go do. I think the challenge a lot of e-learning people that I run into or training people is that they kind of learn, but they're like only if the boss makes them learn, or from 9 to 5. Then after 5, it's like, I'm not learning. I'm going to Twitter, looking up that hashtag Tom Beer, and I'm going out and having fun. No, the thing is, they just kind of just stop. So when you think about what makes you a pro, it's kind of the things I'm going to look at here, is one is the obvious here is your experience and your skills, right? So you have to get some experience, and then there's certain skills you have to have, instructional design, if you're building courses, the technology, whatever it is, right? The skills. To get to that pro level, and this is my own definition, so if you tweet it and it's not appropriate, I'm sorry. But if you, to get to that pro level, it's about establishing your authority. So a good example is coming here and presenting. If you're one of the presenters, there are 200 and some people here that now you're a pro to them because you presented, you were in front of them, you had some ideas, and you shared that with them, right? So it's about finding ways to establish your authority within the industry. And then the other part is sometimes it's just about luck, right? You're just going to get lucky, right? And I'll share a couple of examples of that. And there are things you can do to help yourself get luckier. So let's talk a little about skills and experience. The first thing is you got to be willing to practice your craft. If you play piano and you want to be a really good piano player, right, get a job at some lounge somewhere, you've got to practice. You're not just going to say, well, I'm only a piano player from 9 to 5. If you're an athlete's probably a better example of this. You look at, like, say, a pro basketball player. I'd say rugby, but I don't really know anything about rugby, so I didn't want to mess up. Let's say you're a pro basketball player. There are guys, when I was in the Seattle area, the Sonics were a team over there, and Sean Kemp back in the early 90s was one of the star basketball players in the league, and Michael Jordan was a star basketball player at about the same time. Who knows Michael Jordan? Who knows Sean Kemp? Probably not quite as many. Skill-wise, in terms of their athleticism, very comparable skills. But there was something that was different about Michael Jordan than Sean Kemp. And there's, in most athletic endeavors, there are a lot of people who are athletes and have that kind of natural skill. The ones who really succeed are the ones who are willing to put in that extra effort, right? So where I live at, there's a guy who ended up becoming a pro American football player. And I was talking to a friend of mine. He said, when that guy was a kid, he would take these chains and he'd strapped them to these car tires and he would drag them up and down the alley. So this guy's 10, 11 years old, and he was doing these things. So he had athletic ability, but he started to do things that nobody else was doing, and that put him in a position to be successful. If you want to be really successful at your craft, you've got to be willing to commit the time to do that. To say, if I want to be a top-notch e-learning designer, if I want to be a top-notch trainer, it's going to be more than just working 9 to 5. That you can work 9 to 5, get your money, and do all that stuff. But when you really want to be like a pro, it's where people say that person really knows what they're doing, they're super sharp. You got to commit more time to that, because the person who you're going to compete for jobs later and other opportunities, that's usually the one that gets the job, is the one who's put in that extra effort. So it's one of those things, and a lot of times we don't do that, especially in white-collar type occupations. We don't think of extending our careers outside of that 9-to-5 environment. The other thing is you need to experiment. This is probably the challenge most people have, is you might work in an organization that built like 100 courses, but what happens is you build the same 100 courses, the same course 100 times. You're not building 100 different courses. So that's where like those weekly challenges really come in handy. I mean, you don't have to do the weekly challenges, but that type of thing. And it's that you're put in this position where you've got to build something that's not what you normally would build at work. So, taking some time, doing like the weekly challenge, or what I used to do years ago, like when I was explaining earlier how I had no talent for video, and so I got into e-learning or into training. And then I was working for a healthcare organization, had no money, and which surprised me considering how much I had to pay them every time I went there. But everybody was doing Flash, and I was stuck with this lame PowerPoint stuff. And I wanted to do Flash, but they didn't have the money to buy the software and all that stuff. And so what I did is I would go look at places where I saw good examples that were built in Flash. And if I was stuck with PowerPoint, I would say, well, what can I build in PowerPoint to make it look like Flash? And this was before all these PowerPoint to Flash tools were out there. But I would go out and look for good examples, and I would try to replicate them. Even today, I'll tell people, if you want to learn to be better at building things, you're not a graphics designer, you don't have the visual design experience, go find one of those template sites. You don't want to steal somebody's work, but find a template site and rebuild what you see. Rebuild it, and that's going to teach you how to use the tools that you have, become more fluent with them. But the other thing is you start thinking about colors and layouts and those things that you might not normally do when you're building your own stuff. But when you rebuild something that somebody else has done that's good, then I'm assuming yours is good too, but just qualify that. Anyway, if you're doing those things, you're going to become better at using the tools that you have, and you're also going to become better at your own work. And one of the things I do kind of when I have some time is I'll find like one of these multimedia interactions. David does a great job. This is a good website to write down. He collects multimedia interactions, anything he sees online. It's elearningexamples.com. And all he does is whenever he sees like those news interactions or any type of interaction, he'll take these interactions, he just saves them. And so there's all sorts of little multimedia examples. So what I do, and we do this sometimes in workshops when we do the e-learning workshops, is we just look at an example and we deconstruct it and then we rebuild it. Or you say, let's say, here's your requirement. You've got to take that example, this content, and build, replicate the multimedia element, whatever they have in their rollovers and drag and drop or whatever they're doing. You're going to replicate that and use your content to do that. And then you learn to build the interactions and all that stuff. So if you're at work, a lot of times the organization, you get paid to work there, but sometimes you're just building the same courses over and over and over again. You're really not allowed to do different types of things. Then you've got to take it on your own to go do those things. And once you've done a few of those, then you're actually in a better position when you're at work to say, I've been playing around with this idea. What do you think about this idea? But if you've never played around with it, then you're not in a position to show this idea that you have. And one of my things, from my experience, it's a lot easier when you're working with a client if you can show them something. So if you have a treatment, if you can show them something, then trying to explain how you would do it. Because if you try to explain how you would do it, they're going to say, we don't have time for all that stuff. But if you can say, here's some stuff I was playing around with, here's one approach we could possibly take. When they see it, it kind of clicks and it kind of makes sense. So then you might be able to build, only 98 courses that look a certain way, and you've got now 2 that look a little bit different. Eventually you can kind of build out a portfolio of examples that you can show at work. So you've got to kind of take the initiative to do that. If you don't get to build different types of courses, then it's, if you want to increase in your skills, it's something you've got to determine to do. The other thing, I'm a big community guy, and so I'm always about connecting with others. So before I worked I'm not a software developer. I was actually an Articulate customer. And it's kind of funny because I was actually working on my master's on communities of practice, and none of my projects were turning out the way I wanted to, so I wasn't going to have any success to present at my final thesis thing, and which wasn't bad. It's a learning experience in itself, but I thought, I really want to show something that's good. That's my elephant, by the way, just walked by there. No. So I wanted to show something that was really cool, so I decided to change the focus of my master's degree and focus on, for the communities of practice, and focus on expertise. Because communities are always about people coming together and learning and sharing and talking. So there's this area of expertise. In the Articulate community, it was around using the Articulate tools, and then as a kind of a secondary thing, it was building courses. And so I kind of changed my focus away from all these community of practice things that we were trying to do and focused on sharing expertise, which really became the essence of what we do today, which is, what if I just shared what I knew with no expectation that I'd get anything back from other people? So I wasn't sharing to get a job. I wasn't sharing, to get kudos or to connect or build my network of peers. I was just sharing for the purpose of sharing that I have some level of expertise at something, not video production, and I want to share that with others. So how can I take what I know and just share it? And then let's see what happens. And what was funny was, here I was for like 9 months or so, and all the stuff I was doing was your typical community stuff that almost all the organizations do, and nothing was kind of gaining any traction. And then I just thought, I'm just going to share expertise. I'm kind of lazy by nature. I knew Articulate. I think I could really do this Articulate stuff, and I don't even have to take time out of my life, because it'll just be something I can do at work, right? So it's not going to interfere on my ability to go look for craft beers. So I just started sharing stuff. And so we had a bunch of Articulate users at the organization I was working at. So I thought, well, I'm going to go to the Articulate community. I'm going to glean what they have there, and I'm going to share it with the people in our community that I was building out. And then, when you're sharing, you can't just take, because that's not a good community. So I thought, well, I've got to be better at sharing. So I thought, I'm going to make it a goal that every day I'm going to share 5 tips or answer 5 questions every day. Well, I'm on the West Coast, and all the other people that were active in the community were on the East Coast. So they answered all the easy questions. So when I woke up and I could get into the community and answer questions, all that was left was hard stuff. So then I started building demos and all that stuff. And I wasn't posting as frequently as other people in the community. But then Articulate said, hey, would you be interested in being an MVP in the community because you're really, helping people? And I said, sure. And then this is kind of going into the luck part. I'm just doing this stuff to just share, because that's kind of my goal for my project. Somewhere in the process, around the same time, Elliott Macy, who has these big conferences in the U.S., they just want vendor money. Don't tweet this. They want vendor money, but they don't want the vendors there, right? So they wanted somebody to talk for the vendors, but not the vendors. So Articulate knew our company was part of the Macy consortium and said, hey, would you be interested in presenting on our behalf? I said, sure, I'll go there. So I put together the stuff, not wanting to be embarrassed. I had way too much information, and I had wiki pages and all these things set up. I was doing the presentation, and people, all they asked me was sales questions, like how much did it cost, if I want to buy bulk licenses. It's like, man. So I was able to answer all the questions because we had just negotiated some contracts. And afterwards, the VP, the executive vice president of the company, said, we were really impressed, because they didn't really know me, and said, you knew it. We thought you were like one of our sales guys. And so that preparation later led to my job working at Articulate. So the kind of a combination of, in the community, the connecting with others, just that ability to look at yourself as an expert. And we'll talk a little bit more here about that. But being an expert and having something to share and to give and connect with other people, and just making that available to people creates opportunities for you that you don't even know exist for you yet. And we can I'll just use the weekly challenge, for example. We do the weekly challenge. The people who put a little, the idea is that you just do something real simple. But the people who put a little bit extra effort into that and do really nice work, right? I mean, it takes a little bit longer to do that. They do that. Every single one of those people have gotten freelance opportunities or development work from that. Because not because they're looking for it, but because they're in there doing that and they've just shared stuff and then people see their work. They don't see the click and read course they might have to do at work, but they get to see this really cool example that's only like maybe a 2 or 3 minute demo. So connecting with others. The other thing that's important, like I was starting with before I rambled on, because that's what I tend to do. I'll start walking kind of funny here in a few minutes. The other thing is the Articulate just builds, from the Articulate perspective, just builds software. But it's the users who use the software that come up with the practices and the best tips and techniques and things that you can do. Like some of the, like when David was up here showing some of these video things, right? That's the reason why you want to connect, because you can buy tools, you can read books and all that stuff, but it's connecting with your peers and interacting with them and being part of the conversation that allows you to learn and increase your skills. And most of you probably, would be my guess is, if you were a financial analyst, which, anybody here a financial analyst? Phew, man, that is a job, right? But anyway, if you were a financial analyst and you needed to ask somebody, there's probably like a senior level financial analyst in the organization that you could say, I've got a problem, how do I figure out these formulas or whatever they have to do? And then the person will say, back before Lotus, this is how we did stuff, and they could give you all this stuff. If you're doing e-learning, odds are you are the senior person in your organization, right? There's probably not many people above you, if there are, who can really give you tips and tricks on how to do your work in a different way. So most likely, most of the people I talk to, they are the expert on e-learning and instructional design in the organization. Or if they're not, they're just like one level removed from that. So connecting with your peers is a great way to kind of get the mentorship and those things that might be lacking in your own organization. The other thing about building authority, which is a key part again, doing these presentations, coming here, presenting, putting yourself out there is a great way to do that. The other thing is skip ahead here. Jeanette, I don't know if some of you may know her. Jeanette was one of our community managers. When I hired her, and she was a really sharp lady, but she really wasn't qualified for what I was looking for, but there's something about her that stood out, so we hired her anyway. And so she was kind of learning on the job, and then Storyline came out. She's like, I've got to do all this stuff about variables. I don't know anything about variables. People are going to ask me all these questions, and who am I to talk to anybody about e-learning and all this stuff? I don't really know that much about e-learning. And I told her, I said, look, because we had Screener. Screener was 5 minutes long, right? So I told her, and a lot of times you can look up like 5-minute expert, and it's always written in a negative sense that, watch out for the 5-minute experts. They're going to be all these professionals you can meet on LinkedIn that are going to give you all this advice, but they don't really know anything, right? But you think they're experts because they're on LinkedIn, right? They have some job title that they just made up. But anyway, that's not true for everybody on LinkedIn, by the way. But the thing is, I see 5-minute expert as a positive. And I was telling Janai, I said, look, Michael Allen, who's a great guy, right? He's probably the godfather of e-learning. He's written all these books. If you email Michael Allen and ask him how to do something in a course, I can guarantee you this is what you're going to get. An opportunity for them to come down and sit with you and consult to figure out how they could sell you an e-learning service. But if you contacted Jeanette, who might not know anything about something, she would go out and learn it. She would make a screener tutorial, and she would share that with the person who asked. Now, she might not know everything in depth like Michael Allen, and I don't want to put anything negative on Michael Allen, but the thing is, to the person who needs help at that moment, that 5-minute expert, the person who took the 5 minutes to record the screener and to make that tutorial available to the person who had the question, that person's a better expert than the person who knows a ton of information. And you can establish your authority in the industry by being a 5-minute expert. All you need to do is be 5 minutes ahead of the person asking you a question, right? So if you make a plan, like buy a book, buy a PowerPoint book and say, I'm going to read the book, and for everything they explain, I'm going to do a tutorial on how to do that, right? Maybe you don't know anything about PowerPoint, but by the time you've done all those tutorials, you'll know everything you need to know about PowerPoint. And it's the same thing for instructional design. Maybe you don't know everything about instructional design, but I can guarantee you if you volunteer to do a session like this, or you did some tutorials in the community, or did something that you could say, I'm going to learn it and I'm going to share it, that you would become an expert. You're an expert to the person who needs the help right then, but you would immediately begin to establish your expertise, and you'd start to build authority in the industry, and then when you're looking for work or you're looking for opportunities, the opportunities are going to be there because everybody who's seen your video is going to think you're an expert. I don't know squat about Access, but I can guarantee if I did 10 Access videos, somebody would think I'm an Access expert, but I don't know anything about Access. So the connecting and being willing to share is going to be a great opportunity for you to build your professional portfolio, your experience, and your expertise and authority within the industry. The other thing is being prepared. This is probably one of the key, more practical things. Has anybody here been fired, or I would say fired, laid off from a job, right? So here's typically, I don't know how it works in Australia, but here's how it works in the States. They like you, you're trustworthy, all that stuff. Then one day they decide to get rid of you, right? And there's some security guy standing at your desk with a box with all your goods, and they escort you out the building like you're some sort of person who just broke into the building, right? If you're building e-learning courses, odds are that software you've been using is owned by that company that just let you go. If you were building courses, odds are those courses you were built are on that company's servers and you have no access to them, right? And then you go to apply for a job somewhere and you don't have anything to show. But the other person who went to apply for the job has a portfolio and they can show all this work. Maintain a portfolio. 2 reasons. One is if you're not looking for work, like say you were doing the weekly challenges, you get the opportunity to demonstrate your experience doing diverse things, right? So it gives you an opportunity. If you're focused on having a portfolio, you're not going to put 100 click and read PowerPoint courses on that portfolio, right? Because that'd be boring. Nobody's going to look at that stuff. Well, what you do is you do maybe a drag and drop interaction. There's the click and read thing, and then maybe there's some sort of game thing. You sat and listened to Ruth's demo. You think, I'm going to take that. I'm going to go and try a little gaming thing. Maybe it's something real simple. Now you've got something you put on your portfolio. Maybe you have a blog and you can write about what you did and what you tried and get feedback from people, or jump in the community and ask for some feedback. But you maintain the portfolio. If you should ever lose your job, you've got something to show. And I can tell you now, nobody wants to look at your 20 boring click and read courses, but if you have 5 or 6 diverse examples, even if they're 2 or 3 little minute examples of things, that's going to get you better opportunities than if you have, the same course but just 20 versions of it in your portfolio. So maintain a portfolio. One of the things I like is some of the people who do the weekly challenges, they have blogs, and so what they'll do is they'll do the weekly challenge, and then they do a blog post on what they did in the weekly challenge. And when we see that, because I like that type of stuff, because I'm a community guy, I like to see how people share and learn, I take every opportunity I can to promote them. And then I can tell you this, if you're on the Rapid e-learning blog and there's a link back to your blog, you'll see a pretty significant spike, in visits and stuff. So if that's something you're interested in, there's some opportunities, to do that. Blog, do things. If you do things that help the community, then people in the community do things to promote what you're doing. So it goes back and forth, right? Because It's all about sharing and learning from each other. And when people are doing that, then that's the type of stuff that gets highlighted. If you're not doing that, then you miss out on the opportunity. Sometimes you just need a little luck. I don't speak Spanish, but if there's a big sign that said, under this sign is buried a treasure chest full of gold, I'd walk right past it. But if I had gone to school and learned Spanish, maybe I'd see the sign and I'd dig up the gold and it'd be there, right? So sometimes there are a lot of opportunities out there, but we're just not prepared for the opportunities. So we think it's luck, right? But it's really not luck. I mean, sometimes it is just plain luck, right? But it's usually not luck. What it is that you see opportunities because you were prepared. If you weren't prepared, you wouldn't even see the opportunity. But because you're prepared, let's say you took it on as, I'm going to learn to do all sorts of interactions. By the end of the year, I'm going to have 20 different types of interactions in my portfolio. You do that. At the end of the year, not only do you have a portfolio that if there's an opportunity, you can say, hey, I can go show this, or let's say it's internal, external, doesn't really matter. But the other thing that you can do is you're going to feel confident that you can do more than what you've been doing at work. If you're working in a company where all you're doing is the same type of compliance training, but you've taken the opportunity to prepare yourself, and you've done all these things, and then when opportunity's there, you're prepared. And all of a sudden, you can see the opportunity. If you don't do any of those things, you just don't see the opportunities. They're not visible to you. But when you take that initiative and you do those things, all of a sudden, the opportunities exist. And that could be opportunities in your organization. It's not about preparing yourself to leave the company that you work for, right? But there may be opportunities in your organization. There may be opportunities when you're working with your clients and getting them to see what you do in a different light. Well, if you have examples, if you've done things, if you're learning, you can speak better to how to do training better, right? There's all sorts of things that come from that. So I would say the thing is to be proactive and look for those opportunities. A couple of things that came to mind. So World Vision's here, right? Where's World Vision at? Over there, right? And who's the other? There's another nonprofit, or there's some other nonprofit groups. Are you raising your hands? You just tell me 5 minutes. Yeah. Lingos, and I did this as a blog post a couple times, but Lingos is a group, is one opportunity. They're a consortium of these NGO groups, and they kind of share learning technology and ideas and all that. So all those groups are always, they're short on money typically, and they're short on the resources to build engaging e-learning. And here you have a room full of people who are listening to me talk about how to become a pro. If you want to build your skills, that's a great way to build your skills. There are all these NGO type groups. Lingos is one, but there are other types of groups like that. There's all sorts of community groups where you can go in and you can build demos for them, and you can do things for them. That one is you're helping somebody that you might be even passionate about their cause, so that kind of makes you feel good about that. But the other is you possibly get to do something that you wouldn't normally do in work. And then you have, maybe you win an award, you get recognized. There's all sorts of things that can happen from that. So take advantage of that. There's all sorts of ways. What I did years ago when I said I started in video, then I kind of shifted in more to the training side. Well, I worked at a healthcare group, and it was all nursing type stuff. So I'm not a nurse, and I had no medical experience. So what I did is I realized my opportunities in that organization were kind of limited, because if I wanted to do the training, I wasn't going to be able to do training in that particular group. So I went online. This is when Monster.com and some of those sites were just coming out. So I went online. I looked for every single training, instructional design, any type of job like that. I copied and pasted every single job requirement. It's amazing how many of these groups ask for expertise on adult learning theory, and yet you look at the quality of a lot of training, right? But anyway, so I did a line item of every single thing. I probably did about 100 different job notices, and I made a line item of every single thing that they were looking for. And then on the next column, I wrote in, as if it was like a resume, like if I was writing a bullet point on a resume, my experience doing that. And if I didn't have that experience, if I couldn't say I could do that, I went out and got it. So I went out, I volunteered, I did all sorts of stuff. Anything I could do so I could say I could do that, right? Because when you go to interview, you let them assume that you could do it really good. But the thing is, it's up to them to say, well, how many times have you done that, right? But the thing is, you go out there, what are people looking for? Where are my gaps? What do I have to do to get the skills to get there? So be connected in the industry. Be connected to your peers, right? Your peers are going to have all sorts of help for you. Look for the opportunities. Practice your skills. Don't just settle for what you're doing. I mean, really practice your skills. And then you'll see opportunities exist that you might not see there. You can always contact me. I don't have my email address up there, which is probably convenient. But you can always contact me. It'll be available somehow. And if you have any other questions, or if you're trying to get started, trying to do different things, we just like to help people. So we do that, and then that's the end of it, right? So I'll catch up with David to see how well you guys did here in Australia, and then we'll tweet about how great the people are here. All right, you guys have a great evening, and thanks for letting me be here.